Chinatown keeps booming with more local businesses and tourism, but there are trouble spots, empty lots, trash, vacant buildings. Locals have concerns about crime and homelessness. Now those parts of Chinatown could be poised for a revamp.
It's booming, totally discovered by tourists. I have 150 restaurants in a row.
Chinatown visitation keeps soaring and business is booming. Shanghai Taste is one of the notable restaurants soaking in the success, but turned the corner down the street into different neighborhoods.
Not pedestrian friendly at all. There's a couple eyesores.
Joe Mascaglione says there is trash, dilapidated buildings, and some homeless camps along his commute or jog. A Clark County study found in the 2-square-mile district 77 acres of trouble spots. These photos describe what state law describes as blight. Deteriorating buildings, unkept land, debris piled up. These older, aging parts of Chinatown could be poised for a cleanup.
The point of this redevelopment agency expansion is to have some additional tools to work with those property owners to improve their properties. And so we're going to be widening sidewalks and making it more friendly to those who want to walk.
Commissioner Justin Jones explains what happens if Chinatown becomes a redevelopment area. Property tax dollars can be diverted to make crosswalks, expand sidewalks. Funds can help properties or businesses clean up, renovate, or build. The Clark County Redevelopment Agency also oversees these projects.
Maybe there's a big developer that comes in and they have a really big project that they need some help getting over the finish line. The board can make a decision to do something like a public-private partnership.
In redevelopment areas, state law does allow, as a very last resort, eminent domain with problem properties. Shani Coleman of the Redevelopment Agency explains that's just not on the table.
The carrot approach, where we incentivize and we make it help them see the benefit.
It would help everybody. It would help minorities. It would help locals. It would help tourists. It would help everybody that has any interest of eating or shopping in Chinatown.
So if Chinatown becomes a redevelopment area, businesses could move in and build for bar hopping. A recent code change lifted distance restrictions for liquor establishments. There will be notices sent to locals about the intent for redevelopment areas. If it goes through and gets approved, the classification could be in effect by spring.